I am so ready. Countdown, 3.
I don't know how those companies effectively stay in business in the future.
What you two are doing is a boundless mindset.
Thinking that you weren't going to have to learn a lot. Well, you made a huge mistake.
There's one place I feel safe geeking out is
It's
here.
here.
There's a reason why we chose technology, not marketing.
And good morning. Welcome back to the CIO project. It is the month of April. Yesterday was April Fool's.
Amazing.
Anybody pull any pranks on you yesterday?
No, I don't think so.
Thanks for joining, everybody. Before we get started, hey, listen, research shows that only 40% of regular listeners are actually subscribed to the show. Do us a favor. If you get a value from the show, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And do us one more favor, if you will. Share it with at least 2 of your colleagues who you think could get value from it as well. And don't forget, everybody, you can find us at thecioproject.com. Watch our released episodes there, learn more about our hosts and guests, and drop us a line with any questions, issues, and topics you'd like us to tackle in our upcoming episodes. Except don't ask us about anything AI.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about AI, but I said, if AI were a drinking game, we'd all be hammered by 9:30 in the morning.
Right. And the game would be every time you say AI, you have to drink. Is that the game?
Yeah, exactly. It would replace the old days, replace COVID or work from home or some other thing with AI now, it's fun. But it's a great lead-in because that's what we're going to be talking about. It is. Shockingly.
Yeah, yes.
So we'll have to postpone the alcohol part of this conversation to make it a little bit more.
that and it's like 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, it's early.
We would be hammered by 9. So again, everybody, thecioproject.com. And with all that, let's get into it. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, CIO extraordinaire, Brian Shield. Good morning, my friend.
Great to be here.
CIO of Safeguard Products International. Let's not forget. So, speaking of AI, right? I think didn't somebody at the office say that they were talking to you and they were like, I think Brian said, if I hear the word AI one more time, I'm going to throw up.
Well, just the thing. It's the Kill Two Cities. It's like the best of times, the worst of times.
Yeah.
I really don't mean the worst of times, but there is so much going on.
Right.
It's all exciting. It's all good. It's try and get your arms around it and try to properly channel it it's a challenge. And not so much just for our company, but every company.
Right.
And you and I were talking earlier. We were talking about today's discussion, and I think what makes it difficult for people, I think, to discuss best practices and all that. Well, best practices.
Yeah, best practices from where?
It's so new, and also the culture of every company is different,
right?
And it's almost you have to start with culture.
Yeah,
you have to think about your company, where you're at. Are you kind of a tech-centric organization or not? Are you inherently conservative in the sense of very, very thoughtful from a legal perspective and how you engage on new things, and very protective of obviously of your data and your company's employees and everything else, reputation, whatnot. And so it your starting point differs. Every company's starting point is different, and every IT organization is different. If you think about it, right? You and I both know a lot of CIOs and CTOs, and some are very command and control. And so now you throw in there's this whole, embracing shadow IT thing. And I think it makes some of them crazy. Some people I talk to, it's, they're trying to jam command and control into, citizen development model or, with shadow IT concepts. And it's just, it's a mess.
It's funny, actually, you used the term citizen developer the other, I think I heard it from you the first time this week. I don't know if that's a new term and I just have missed it.
Yeah, I didn't even know either. I just,
or did you just spit it out?
So, I mean, not developer in the traditional sense. We're not asking to learn how to write C++ or
Python or
anything. But they're effectively developing solutions, right?
Right.
And we never had to an IT, and even way back, and we had tools that were way back, the accesses and even Lotus nodes and some of these other things that gave average employees kind of the ability to be able to be sort of, I'll say, productive, without having to be, IT professionals, and I have to understand concepts like SQL development and front and back end issues and even sometimes UI stuff.
Okay.
But now everyone can be a developer, in some respects. And
truly,
Truly.
Yeah.
Truly. Or at least they can leverage content to develop solutions that can drive productivity. And that's different, right?
Right.
And I think it's great. I'm super excited about it. And I think it's a really incredible transition, in terms of where we are right now compared to the old days.
Right.
Because I think building sort of these federated models that'll get the best out of IT, yet being able to kind of choreograph, so to speak, our relationship with the corporation and individuals have a lot of talent, and there's so much for us to talk about today on this topic. So we could literally go down a million rabbit holes. So we're gonna try to contain ourselves here, and we'll be having many, many more of these discussions with experts and others, in the weeks and months ahead.
Yeah. I think, to that point, one of the things I was really looking forward to doing with this topic today is really leaning into your experience specifically, right? So you just came out of one organization just last year, right? It's only been 9 months now. And so AI, I want to go back to something you said earlier, and I'll come back to this in a second, which is, the newness of AI. So it's funny, you were talking about this, I think, at dinner or whatever it was. And I was talking about how, like, I see these ads pop up wherever I'm at, right? And I see this over and over again. I've been in AI for 14 years, and I've been an AI developer for 14 years and have all this experience. And I'm just like, I'm like, that's not registering for me, right? So I did a little research of my own, and there's certainly a difference between, I'm going to call it pre chat GPT and post chat GPT, right? Like AI goes all the way back to the 80s, right? With begins of machine learning and everything like that. And I just feel like a lot of people who are selling themselves, right? Because that's what they're doing, right? These are ads, right? They're selling themselves, or talking about the fact that they've been in AI for a number of years. But I'm kind of calling a little bit of BS on that a little bit,
Well,
right?
I don't know if it's BS.
All right.
No, I'm going to give you a different angle.
All right.
Because, when you think of a generative AI, I mean, the key word here is gen, which is generating new content. Right. It's, we've never had a tool that did that before. When we think back, Google, when search became big, it's like, or when other things were available to us, like we never had the ability for a tool to just on its own take our inputs and do something with it, to be creative, whether it's music or text or other solutions.
Right.
I think, and by the way, I think just a comment there, it's like generative AI is not the answer for every solution. I worry a little bit that now, armed with so many flavors of generative AI, that everybody thinks the answer to the question is one of those flavors of generative AI. There's other forms of AI that are more effective than generative AI, depending on your problem space. And so there's probably we could have that separate conversation another day. Will be probably like maybe the most common one that most people are familiar with in some respects. But machine learning, I mean, like, we've been working with that since sometime in the mid 2015 area or something like that. We back at the Weather Channel and all the things we're doing with forecasting and other areas, like with baseball and some of the Moneyball related things. So there's a lot of ML stuff that makes a lot of sense.
And how would you define the difference between that type of machine learning, or that type of AI versus the generative AI world that we live in today? Like, what would be the sort of simple definition of the different, that would
highlight generate. Like, if you think of some of the things with machine learning, some of the use cases that we've been involved in, they're more like dealing with things like predictive analytics, and there's more like forecasting is a great example of things like that, right? Where, or if you think about some of the work that we did, like in sports, it's like, analyzing a batter's swing, analyzing like video streams and stuff like that. It's not a great generative AI use case. Like, you take a whole bunch of video files and say, oh, tell me what you think is missing from this player's, swing development. Like, typically would look at generative AI as the internet model. You know what I mean? Like, you would look at, because it has to break it down into so many pieces of granularity. And so there's a lot of other tools that do a better job of that. And so I think that's a really good point in the sense that even if we just focus on the category of generative AI, we know, from work and other things that, not all two generative AIs are not the same. We have a great example of work recently where, we kind of beat our heads against the wall and we were getting about, 70+% accuracy in one use case.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that particular one, I think we switched to Gemini and jumped up 15 points, without changing anything.
Right. Without changing
And,
anything.
now we use other tools like Claude that are better than, those tools. And so
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you have to get really comfortable with is the fact that if you're starting with Copilot or OpenAI or Claude or whatever it is you're starting with,
Yeah.
be mindful that they all vary. And even with
Yeah.
separate releases, sometimes you go backwards a little bit. You do a release and, you're at 7%, success rate on one of your AI things. And you could drop depending upon which version of the LLM you're using.
Well, and certain applications that we're putting out are using multiple models for the LLM application. The project over the Red Sox that we just launched for opening day, I think we're using 3 or maybe even 4 models to produce this one application.
Which is just, we again, as we said before, we go down a million rabbit holes and we'll avoid doing that. But just a comment there, which is, think about it if you're in QA. There's a whole testing all those, because all those elements will go through releases, and now suddenly things that may have worked or didn't work before, can work, and things. And so it's going to put a real premium, I think, on the QA organizations. And the role of AI and QA is going to really have to really develop in order for us to be able to test load and test QA and regression and things against all these variables.
Yeah, all that's changing rapidly. It's probably a really good segue to go back to where I took us off course here in a second. But before I do that, one more little rabbit hole item is I'd love to get Brian in here to talk about how he's retooling, Brian Brodsky, about how he's retooling for all, because so much AI development going on right now. And I do think that there's an element. I mean, you may argue this actually sounds like it conflicts with what you were saying a minute ago, but I do feel like if you fast forward maybe a year-ish, give or take, that we talk about everything as being AI products. This is an AI project, this is an AI POC, this is an AI stuff versus other things that are going on. But at some point, everything's got AI, right? At some point, it's just the world of software today and how things are done, right? And stuff like that. So, someone who is running a QA organization today, especially in a
complex environment,
and also a progressive environment, because there are a lot of environments like what we're involved in that are getting very aggressive about moving into AI. So I'd love to get Brian in here to talk about how he's retooling for that, because that's a whole world in and of itself, right?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, let's go back. Let's start at the beginning here a little bit. So you kind of phrased it as sort of having worked at multiple companies, and if you're listening to this, and like all of us, we're all learners. So I by no means, by the way, are my comments meant to be completely authoritative. Like, I don't know that we've got enough enough under our belt just yet to sort of say these things as complete facts, because every company, as we said earlier, are different. But the very first one in my mind when we're thinking about AI in your respective companies is culture, because the culture of the 2 companies that I've been working at the last few years are radically different. Neither in bad ways. I love working at both of them, for different reasons. And but if you're trying to do AI, it's like there are so many considerations that come into play. It's like, what is the leadership team's view of all this? Are they advocates? Are they cautious? Are they they want you to put your shoulder behind it? Are you on your own, in an island, trying to build these AI things? And they find it like a curiosity, or is it more like it's like in the torpedoes kind of thing? We got to this is kind of fundamental to our long-term success, and we need to be an AI first kind of organization. And I've worked for multiple companies, and they're all a little bit different, and how their HR organizations are structured, and legal organizations, and even their IT organizations, as we said earlier. I mean, there's a lot of of us that grew up leading IT organizations, and I think sort of the somewhat centralized model was pretty much what most people dealt with. Larger corporations, global companies, obviously had a more federated model because they were so large, kind of thing. But I think that as we move into a model of, as we said before, kind of encouraging some level of citizen development, kind of thing, like it's command and control doesn't really work, right? It's you're kind of like herding cats here a little, and so now you got to come up with a method of how do we encourage and orchestrate not dictate? And how do we put
Right.
how do we put our governance around this so that we can protect assets and make people aware without, without being draconian in some
Right.
respects?
Right. And the
So
word
there's
governance in and of itself always feels draconian to everybody.
Yeah, and it's funny as technologists over the years, we've developed a certain comfort level with, in every company, you and I were talking before, every company's different. Like whether you're a company that, is providing services to other companies where you have, stock audit responsibilities and other sort of things is very different than some company that really somewhat stands on its own, if you will. And so you've got responsibilities to shareholders and responsibilities to your partners and things like that, and to protect your assets.
Right.
And so it's one thing to protect your assets with professional individuals doing these things. It's another thing to protect your assets when perhaps you've got less experienced people now knocking things out a little bit. And so are they developing things internally or externally, or
Right.
or do they bleed into some external things? Anyway, so there's a lot of challenges that kind of go into the framing of that. But to me, that's the most important thing, which is it's understanding your culture, and that's irrespective of AI. It's like if you're trying to be a leader in any technology, you can only do it if the company's supportive, engaged, and has appropriate budgets. So
Right. And then there's, I think, to add to what you're saying, one of my notes here is, and I think it's very related to the culture, the company, the budgets that you're just talking about, is what does the demand look like right now? Right. So there's supply and demand,
demand
right?
or
Demand for
skills,
AI,
AI
demand for AI development.
solutions.
Yeah, the solutions is the right word, right? There's POCs, there's pilots, there's people knocking on our door saying, "Hey, we want to do this with AI. Hey, we want to do that with AI." Can you talk a little bit about what the demand has been like and how that's grown over I would say
Yeah,
even the
I
last
think.
few months,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
the funny thing is, which it'll be very interesting to see how this sort of shakes out. And there are companies that are further along, certainly than we are, and I've talked to many of those CIOs, CTOs about how they approach this. But if you think about it, almost every IT organization, I'll say pre AI, would have said that they couldn't keep pace with the amount of demand
100%.
pre AI.
Pre-AI, yes.
So
And
now,
I want to get back to pre-AI is what, 3 years ago?
yeah.
Which goes back to what I was saying
This
earlier.
kind of
Yeah.
sounds like we're talking about Stone Age,
I
like,
know.
way back 3 years ago. I mean, if you ask the average IT leader, like, hey, what would you measure? What do you think the average level of, yeah, kind of employee, like, what's the word, capacity
Yeah.
is? They'd be like, 110%. Like, I mean, it certainly wouldn't be 80. It wouldn't be near where we'd like it to be in certain cases because there's always a limitless amount of opportunities and projects and technologies and things. And then you throw AI on top, and suddenly, a lot of these, maybe the best people who, can pick up some of the new technologies too, they just pick up a whole nother job, which is do your day job and then find time to be an advocate, find time to be an educator, find time to build up proof of concepts and things. And I think that to me is sort of for us a little bit is the next tricky phase of our evolution, which is balancing sort of traditional work. You got to build and maintain some of these corporate systems and external systems that in our case, for other customers, and we're doing it. Now there's a blend because solutions that we're now doing
Have
before
AI components.
can be used with AI, but there's not everything, and not you get some legacy things that that are not AI oriented in some respects. And so I think that's going to be the new hurdle, which is this balancing act when AI is still sort of evolving, and we don't have enough practitioners in our respective companies to be able to kind of like fully leverage it and know when to kind of leverage some of the AI and when a more traditional solution might be appropriate.
Which is interesting because, what I'd love to do is pause and think about how there's so much press, which I believe is also creating so much anxiety, not only in our industry, but in the world in general, right? That basically says, AI is taking over and it's putting it's putting people out of jobs. And really, what we're talking about at the moment and what you're describing is almost the exact opposite. Like there's more to do now, at least at this moment, at this inflection point. There's more to do now than ever. I mean, that's how it feels to me right now.
Well, I think there's more opportunity to get more done more quickly
Yes.
than ever before. And at the same time, with sort of this new citizen development community,
Yes.
drive greater productivity across the
Right.
board. So even if we're not talking the most strategic systems, which
Right.
tend to be more focused in the IT spaces most of the time these days, there's a whole other layer within the organization, which is everybody should be leveraging AI just to be more productive in their own space.
Mhm.
And so the two together is a huge, huge windfall for overall corporate productivity.
Right.
So I think that's all good. I guess it partly depends on how you benefit from that. Does it give you the capacity to do things you couldn't do before?
Mhm.
So now that you maybe compete more effectively in your respective space, drive higher ROI, things like that? Or do you look at it from the perspective of is like in certain areas where, hey, maybe we don't quite as many people now in this space or that space because we are more productive.
Right.
And I think every company's has a little bit of journey in that respect. If you look at some of the layoffs recently, I mean, we saw where Meta's made references to how many people they're letting go, and some of these numbers are big numbers. And we
Right.
saw Salesforce recently do the same thing, and and a lot
But
of
when you dive, and not to go, this is a completely different conversation, right? But
Yeah,
when you
it is.
dive deep into those, it isn't necessarily what it seems like on the surface. Meta made massive, just for 1 second, like
Yeah.
Meta made massive investments in AI, or let's say engineering and its engineering capabilities towards things that they were focused on doing, and some of those things aren't paying off. There's kind of a ratcheting back a little bit on the investments they have made and things like that. I don't know if it is exactly because
No,
they've all of a sudden AI is doing everybody's job. It's not that.
It's not that, and it's also not what they say it is, which is we've dumped so much money into our data centers that now we can't afford tens of thousands of people.
Mhm.
Like, okay, there's truisms across the board.
Yeah.
But I feel like right now, some companies are making some of those dramatic reductions.
Right.
And they're saying like, oh, we got to pay for AI.
Yeah.
And that's, in my mind, largely disingenuous.
Yeah.
There are elements of that are completely true, but it's almost like we're just spreading peanut butter over this whole thing and saying that's the reason. And if you dug into any of those companies, there's a myriad of reasons, whether it's sort of bad decisions they may have made in the past, or how they're trying to pivot their employee base
in their investment,
their investments. And in their investments, and so. And I kind of hate that a little bit. I kind of hate that they're using AI kind of as sort of the boogeyman here.
Exactly.
To sort of
cover the boogeyman,
to kind of cover all these corporate issues.
Yeah. So we totally agree. So if we kind of come back to where we were at today, I think that it's interesting because it does, like to your point, it does depend, right? This whole issue does depend. Like for us, it's creating more work than ever. Like I feel like in the technology space, we're all working harder than we ever were before.
Well, that's because we're doing like two jobs, right?
Yeah.
But that's okay. I mean, that's okay for a period of time because I look at it like we're in that, we're in that tweener state, right? Where it's like we have sort of the, traditional IT. Now we're introducing this other, other capability
it's
that
like a startup.
allow us to drive more efficiently.
It's like running a startup.
Yeah, but right now we're almost in the end. And we're in the end state, which is this and this, and we're blending them, but the blend is still early stage because there's so many other prerequisites, right? I mean, you and I talked before. It's like we can be ready, we can be excited about it, we can understand all there is to understand about how to most efficiently leverage Claude and other capabilities and things.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that our data is well prepared. It doesn't mean that we have a highly sophisticated semantic layer that makes it easy for people getting access to content, and that all of our data is very clean so that it doesn't introduce other concerns with ultimately quality of our solutions.
Yeah.
So there's so many predecessor functions now.
That need to be addressed.
Yeah, and not that they didn't always exist, but as developers, we knew how to work around some of those things, right? We knew how to leverage structured data, unstructured data. When you now take someone who works in human resources and now they want to start doing some things on their own, it's not like everybody knows how to deal with SQL or understands sort of
Right.
best practices as pertains to sort of
Right. And
development.
the citizen developers will immediately run into things like, hey, I need to access data through an API. And, that has to, someone's got to help them with that.
Yeah, or even just basic. When we were having a conversation the other day, and someone said that that they've been spending time in this, and that they're ready to write some apps that they could deploy kind of into production, with external customer, almost customer facing. And I'm like that's crazy talk. Like, I'm like, I mean, just starting at the beginning, it's like, all right, well, what are your data sources that you're going to use? I mean, you have no access to data. Oh, right. What I mean? Like built out,
Right.
define the requirements and expectations of what this app's going to do.
Yeah.
And the person's like, well, I get loose ones. And I'm like, perfect. So once we build the app, how do we test it?
Right.
So testability is not, we've obviously learned over the years how all these things going to work. These are, we have to create like a lean version of all of these things for everybody else now, so that we're not asking everyone to be a business analyst. We're not asking to be a project manager. We're not asking to be a software developer or a data architect or things. But they have to be almost like a layer across all those things so that they understand. And IT, obviously owns some of those things. So it is a much, much more of a partnership. But it's like we have to kind of teach folks like where they, where they need to go if they when they need help and things. And that's another change in kind of the role of IT, right? Like it's like you have to, no matter if you weren't before, you have to be an internal consultant now.
Right. So this is great. This is a great segue into where I was really hoping to go with this today, which is, if you can, to the extent that you can, share with us sort of programmatically what you're putting in place today, kind of what it looks like, employee education, right? Governance without it feeling like governance, right? The guidelines, the guardrails, right? What's it looking like?
Well, I think whether, regardless of companies I've worked at recently, I think we all aspire to make employees as productive as we can. Right. And the degree of sophistication that people are being asked to, or the opportunity to learn varies a bit. But, in my past life, we were using OpenAI Enterprise as sort of our, lowest common denominator.
Yep.
Right. And I think I started.
And they were the first front runner, right? They were.
Yeah. I mean, it was a good decision. I thought it was smart, and the way our data was structured, Copilot wasn't as powerful as it could have been, in part because we had some concerns about our underlying data, the Microsoft side, in terms of inadvertently exposing different departments' content. And so we thought OpenAI made the most sense. And it worked out great. And it got educated. And
it was a great starting point.
It was a great starting point.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny, I say 80-20. I thought it was like 80-20 rule, right? Okay, I could use that for 80%, and then we'll find a number of AI tools to kind of fill the 20. I'm now kind of finding it feels more like it's not 80-20 now. It's feeling more like it's like 60-40.
And the it in this case is ChatGPT.
Yeah, and not that it's not OpenAI better. It's just that I think the assumption that one tool would get us to the 80 is turning out, at least in my experiences, is turning out not to be the case, because there are so many capabilities in some of those other products as well that are subtly different.
Like Claude Suite.
Like take Claude, right? And if someone wants to do something and they think it's a better fit in finance, then that becomes a finance solution, right? And so, if engineers think that, fill in the blank, say it's Claude, code or other things is the right solution for them, then they shift to Claude code. So it's, I think the 80-20 is probably more like, right now it's probably 60-40,
You think it's that high? I think it's really sliced almost evenly across the board, because we're all learning that these different models have different strengths and weaknesses, right?
But I meant more like baseline. So that like baseline. So for the average employee that's in marketing or HR or, some operational role.
As opposed to like like software development.
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay,
you
got
take the average baseline of it. I mean, like, because the way I kind of look at it is, I'll say the entree here is, let's train people up to understand like prompt engineering. Let's train people up to understand the importance of data and the importance of data quality, the importance of some levels of governance, the appropriate levels of governance,
Right.
the do's and the don'ts, right? Like,
Right.
how do you protect your data? How do you use private LLMs so that you're not exposing your content to other public environments for training purposes, other things, and exposing it? Like, no one in the world would ever take confidential information and just like put it in Twitter or X. They wouldn't, because they would know like, ooh, that's not good,
Yeah,
right? Because
right.
that becomes public information. But when it comes to sort of AI things, people don't think that way, because they think of it a little bit like, more like, hey, I'm used to doing some of these kinds of things in my search bar, and someone, not that you put in confidential information, but we're now into a different space now. Now, when it's like we're asking people to kind of use their head a little, because we can't always control this, in terms of what information you put in there and
Right.
what information gets kind of, brought into the general public. And so that's going to be that's a departure, because we're, it's going to require greater testing, greater training. Your AI policies become more important. Albeit the hard thing with policies is how many people remember policy once they've heard it, right? And so there's
Right.
So it has to be like
classic.
reinforcement now,
Yeah. It's the classic sort of like, you send it out once, maybe they read it, maybe they don't. It goes on the shelf, it collects dust, right? That's the issue with
yeah, but this
policy.
one's now we're at the point where things can't collect dust, right? Because it's the fear factor is changing, right? We saw something that was yesterday on our all hands meeting about the ability to be able to there are bad guys who can leverage these tools for nefarious purposes, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah.
These bad actors,
And as powerful as is for us is just as powerful for them, right?
yeah, and we're playing catch up, right? We're always going to be on the defense.
Cat and mouse.
It's like people come up with creative ways to sort of exploitations and things, and so we'll have to remain diligent. But the tricky part is going to be the diligence is now not just professional technology people and others. Now it's a broader category of folks.
Right.
So we have to make sure, we're so that I think the coverage elements, so your base of exposure has just increased.
Right.
In some respects.
Right. So what, from an educational standpoint, can you share what you're doing today?
Oh, yeah. So we've built a partnership with a company who has allowed us to basically create a certification program.
Okay.
So every employee in our company is expected to complete a certification.
Okay. And this is AI certification?
Yeah,
use of
AI
AI?
certification, basic things, basic fundamentals.
Uh-huh.
Those fundamentals will differ depending upon what your role is.
Okay.
And things like that, which I think is important.
Yeah,
because there's generic understanding AI, then there's the do's and don'ts in each of your respective areas. I think that's a nice add to everything. It'll do training, it'll do when you do prompting, it'll be like, hey, here's a scenario, let's write some stuff, and it'll tell you how you did and how you can get better. And then it's like, eventually though, what's exciting about it to me, and this goes back to culture, is really, as we were talking about this, I was at a sales meeting yesterday talking about this, and I really want people to look at this as it's a great opportunity in their career.
Oh,
not to go into
100%.
this, but it's easy to go into this with uncertainty and anxiety and things. And what I'd love to see is, like, we now have, I can't remember the recent numbers, but all of our champions, we have AI champions in each department.
Right. So define the champions really quick.
Yeah. So in every department, we've identified 1 to 2, sometimes a little bit more, individuals who were defined as champions, who were dumping more education, more capabilities into.
Right.
We're kind of expecting,
and they were the first ones that took the base training, right?
Became certified. Yeah. I mean, outside of technology groups, and they. But what's great about it, because if you think about it, in the role of IT, one of the biggest challenges we've had historically is that, because we're always going to have challenges with whether it's budget and and what people want to get done with a limited number of resources and things.
Right.
It's like we tend to focus on those things that are deemed by the company as being strategic, right? Which thing's going to drive the most ROI? Which one gives competitive differentiation? All that stuff. And it's human nature, right? The problem with that model, and is that I always believe that it's more like a portfolio strategy. You have to be able, though, to be able to kind of also address tactical improvements in the company.
Okay.
Otherwise, the rank and file individual employee never sees those improvements, right? You implement the ERP system, right? You slave away. And we've had guests on it every single time you mention ERP. It's so funny.
Their eyes are too.
Oh.
Any experienced CTO, CIO that we talk to who's been around a few decades, you mention ERP implementations and their eyes start twitching, right?
all the therapy comes back, and so, but the point with that is that, like a traditional IT person or group of people you could have a team of 15, 20 people
Right.
toiling away for 18 months or more, implementing a solution that gets seen by the finance department.
Right.
And not that it's a bad thing, because it's critical to the success of a company. But the point I'm making is that a lot of energy can go into things that are seen by very few. The opportunity with I think with AI and with having champions in those departments, and the reason why I think it's so important is as technologists, we don't have enough time to understand every department intimately. I think technology groups, IT teams have done a remarkable job of understanding the business. We understand the business better than any other C-suite in a company by far, because we have to know, in some respects, I like to say, how the sausage is made.
Yeah.
In
Right.
every department. No one else has that responsibility.
They don't have that. They don't have that insight. It's not required of them.
No, and
Right.
even if they're in a GA space, they have a working knowledge, but they don't have intimacy.
Right.
Right. But now, like when you think about AI, especially for our citizen developers, if you will, it's like we have awareness. I think technology groups have awareness, not intimacy. Now we have the ability through these, I'll call our champions,
Right.
have intimacy. Right? They have intimacy.
Right. So it's a partnership.
Yeah, 100%. Because I don't know that, Mary in finance, spends 3 hours a day dumping data from an ERP system into this massive spreadsheet tome where she toils away trying to get
The cube.
Yeah, and tries to get information. Like, I don't know those things. I don't think most IT groups know those things.
Right.
But those champions in those departments, they know those things. They know where time is spent. And so my hope here, we've had some pretty early successes. My hope here is that we can now uncover those aspects. And what that means is that's not going to, by the way, drive the ROI largely, of the company, but it's going to make the organization exponentially more productive.
Right.
And so that's kind of what I'm hopeful for in terms of kind of broadening the, I'll call it the tactical layer of the 80-20 rule. So making everybody, like if you're writing a job description, it shouldn't take you more than 15 to 20 minutes max.
Anymore.
Yeah. Like the old days when I've been days slaving over like the right word to use and stuff, is gone. Like, and I remember developing, 4 job descriptions.
Yeah.
And I remember timing myself how long it took me to write them. This is probably a year ago or a little bit more. And I remember it took me 13 minutes. And I remember, and I was just testing myself a little bit. And I remember giving them to everybody else. And I'm like, well, let me know your feedback. And people would be like, I don't know, I think I changed that word to this word. And it was very, very, very minor feedback. And I thought to myself, wow, that's remarkable,
Oh, right.
Because the old days that would become, it would be a very time, consuming exercise. Really. So anyways, we have a little bit of change there. But my only point is that, so 80-20 rule or 60-40, whatever it is, but there's that tactical layer that I think we're trying to spread like peanut butter across the organization.
Right.
So there's awareness.
Right.
On top of that, we have a curriculum that we're refining right now. So,
so far what we've covered is we have the curriculum. So there's a partnership with a curriculum company. That's really
we have certification
that comes with certification, correct?
Right. And that certification, one of the things I love, this is made me so happy. A couple of people mentioned to me that like, oh, I put that out on LinkedIn, that I'm now certified in this and that. And to me, like, like that's kind of what I want. I want people to be like proud of the fact.
Yeah.
They complete these things and like
that you were able to provide it.
Yeah. So we're building a page on our intranet now, and part of that sort of all AI, right? And then we'll have a thing where we'll focus on some of these things, like who's been certified, like what departments. I think we're gonna have a little department challenge we're gonna kick off in the next 2 weeks. in terms of like what percentage of departments have the most certifications and things.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And we're building a section.
So it's like it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, we're trying to make it fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
but obviously it's productive, right?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's hugely productive and it's fun. And so, it's like what I'm reading into this, because I didn't know about that part of it, is that, this is quelling anxiety with productivity.
Well, that's my hope. Yeah. And we'll have some celebratory things that we'll do, and we'll have some giveaways, and we give people, allow people to kind of accumulate points and different things.
Yeah.
And we're creating what I characterize as a wall of wins. So when you go into this new site, it's going to contain little mini video vignettes, if you will, of some of our successes, and will allow people to kind of provide their feedback on them. They'll also be able to download those GPTs and other things. And so, I'm trying to, so whatever we can do to kind of make this viral internally as humanly possible. So
that's super cool. So we have the certification, we have the programs. We've started with the champions, right?
Yep.
And so there's been a real concerted effort to really develop that partnership with the champions, right?
Yeah,
get them educated. So now we're like, I would say that it's providing a degree of alignment between IT and kind of a power user group that we've never really seen before, which is really cool, right?
Oh, it's great.
And so now we are extending that education, that
broadening the education
to the greater audience.
Yeah. So that's, let's call that like, I don't know if that's phase one, but that's one element of what we're doing. However, and so like I would characterize that what we're trying to do in those areas is get people to like, if this were back in college, this would be like class 101 and 102.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. The tricky part with AI is we've got other groups that are now want to get, or that are at like the 301.
Yeah.
So suddenly, those folks that are a little bit closet developers or pent up developers and other things, have this or
inherent inherent technologists
or had inherent challenges that they could never get solved, now have a tool to kind of address
and have dove in.
Yeah, which is fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
But it introduces a little pivot. Right.
Okay.
So in our world, we kind of thought historically as this is like at a macro level, a two-step process. There's like a top-down approach and a bottoms-up approach.
Right.
The top-down approach was we have, in our case, multiple years of developing fairly sophisticated AI solutions as they pertain to kind of at an IT level in support of our business and our external customers. And many of those have been very, very successful. And so that'll continue. That's a top down.
Okay.
That's like hardcore engineering and other aspects of things. The bottom up is what I was referring to, which is how do we then sort of spread the love here a little bit across sort of the organization.
Get them trained up. We
now have like almost like a little tier, right? Which is my 301 tier, if you will, which is people that want to do more sophisticated work, and we chose Claude kind of as the tool of choice, similar to what we do most of the time in development, and so now we have a different effort, which is like, how do we accelerate sort of the development of real apps, using this group. So I think you're going to find in our company that there'll be 3 tiers of AI users.
Yeah. User groups.
Yeah. There'll be sort of like, there'll be tier 1, which I'll call sort of the average everyday employee kind of thing, who probably hopefully develops a working knowledge of it, may or may not develop sort of a more sophisticated called app dev kind of more solution. Yeah. And even when I say app dev, it's not even app dev. It's I don't have a good word for it, but
agentic solutions.
Well, in certain cases, agentic, but I mean like, just doing AI, I mean, I think when you say app dev, I think it scares people away because it's, we're not asking people to write code. We're writing people to use tools, that write code.
I was just going to say, there's like there's like a overlap there.
But when I was saying before, where we need to kind of have that group having a working understanding of all phases, from business requirements to data quality to access to data to testability to supportability and things like that. That's that 301 group. They're going to, because now they're doing real work, and we're
so in a way, you could call it the power user, like the AI power user.
That's fair.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Right. So you have your everyday user, your
I
everyday
never.
AI
Yeah,
versus.
this is funny. We're kind of. I got a PowerPoint slide on this. Yeah, we sort of have the everyday user. We have the champions.
Which are sort of the layer over the everyday user.
Yes.
Right.
And then we have power users.
Power users.
Some of those are the champions too, but many are not. And then we have, I'll say, sort of like hardcore kind of
developers, right?
Developers, traditional developers that are now leveraging these tools to build corporate solutions.
A lot of
doesn't
the ones.
mean that group at the 301 level, like I reference, they need a good name for that, the power users, I guess.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that those folks cannot be part of that effort. They will be kind of part of that effort. But I mean, today they're a little bit of, apples and oranges right now. We're kind of
it's really
them together.
No, you did a good job. That's really clear. That makes sense. Right.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So
anyways, I'll pause.
So this to me introduces there's a lot going on, right? And it's all great. And I think you're doing a fantastic job really providing structure, right? And helping people, enablement, right? That's the word that comes to mind, is like beautiful enablement. Now there's a lot going on. So the word governance kind of comes into mind. Like, how do we kind of corral this so it's not too chaotic, right? I feel like I need to bring up my thesaurus right now and come up with a different word for governance, because everybody hates that word, right?
It is a dirty word at work.
That's why I promise. I don't have the attention span right now to come up with a synonym. But let's talk about it.
I just use the word guardrails.
Okay, let's use guardrails. So
because it seems to be less toxic.
Yeah.
And
so what are we doing there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one is that we're asking individuals to do, because at the end of the day, I know we're bouncing here a bit. At the end of the day, you're, and this is an overused expression, but it's true. You're only as good as your data, right?
Okay.
And so, you and I were talking about some article we were reading about, and they were talking about Snowflake, and they're like, even if your data's in Snowflake, it's like, and Snowflake does a remarkable job as a data warehouse tool in cloud environments. But even then, it's not that you have the data there. It's like there's so much other elements. Now we have to get into like masking considerations, semantic layers. And there's a lot of things that in our company, or almost all companies, I think, you're not fully there yet. Right. You've got pieces and parts that are there. You might have structured data. You got unstructured data.
Right.
And now you've got these citizen developers.
Okay.
That want to be productive.
Right.
And so, there's a pivot going on, not just with us, but with a lot of my colleagues, about how we expose content in a controlled sandbox kind of environment that allow people to, accelerate their journey. And I think, it's one thing to do that with POCs, so proof of concepts. It's another thing if you're doing sort of writing production applications, right? But at least with the POCs, we've going back to the beginning here on Guardrails, we're basically screening, our BRDs or business requirements documents initially, just so that people have a working understanding of, hey, here's my POC,
right.
here are the things that go into it, here's the kind of data I need, here's what I'm expecting from the application, here are some of the drivers. Because you think about all those requirements ultimately in a traditional IT organization drive sort of like how the testability aspects of it, and so we just skip over all these things and say, oh, I hadn't really thought about all the requirements, and I hadn't really thought about which kind of data I'm going to need, because now it's going to require groups to have to expose that content in a method that or in a format that allows individuals to retrieve it.
Yep. Right. And then we can dive into, performance issues and all that kind of stuff around data. Do you want to talk about the data? You want to dive into the data for a minute?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And then we can kind of come back to the guardrails aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right?
At the end of the day, it's overused expression, but data is, it's so fundamental to all of this, and
it's central. It's really become central.
Yeah.
And it's getting exposed.
Yeah. And I think I started telling the story before about someone who said they could deploy an application, on their own or something. And I'm like, you don't have access to the data. And it's like, and you haven't defined requirements, and you have no understanding of testability, and you haven't thought through cyber concerns, and haven't thought through any of the other controls that we might have, and, compliance requirements, and you haven't thought through like supportability issues once it goes into production, or if it was touching our customers, we had a problem with it. Like, how do we define root cause analysis, and does it become part of an SLA? and things like that. And so there's all these things that, and so we're really focused right now with a lot of companies on internal work because at least then we can sort of cut our teeth, or they can cut their teeth
Right.
on sort of the art of how to build solutions and stuff. While, we kind of work behind the scenes on how do we, how do we reinforce those guardrails, so that as we kind of pivot and try to leverage these tools more externally, that we've got a method to the madness, if you will. I mean, we've already been doing it for a long time, but now we just need to kind of come up with a method on the data side where it doesn't require a professional developer to be able to do a lot of the things that we've done historically.
Well, and so to do this, there needs to be a layer built right on top because we've got all kinds of data sources.
Oh
Right?
yeah.
Right. So, we got, like you said, we got structured data, we've got unstructured data, we've got transactional systems that provide real-time data, right? And they're all very different, right? And they're coming from different places and they're in different structures. I think the point that you made about like Snowflake is it's not necessarily as simple as just hoisting
Snowflake.
and hoisting it all into Snowflake,
Well,
right?
well,
And
yeah, in many
right?
cases, I think in our world, at least,
Mhm.
I mean, Snowflake is the common denominator, I think, in terms of
Becoming more so.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Where ultimately much of this lives,
Mhm.
and the other element of this, by the way, we didn't talk about is just as we're creating content, as groups are creating content, we're aggregating content.
Yeah.
It puts a much higher premium on not just when we say quality. Quality can be misunderstood too. Sometimes quality is like the timeliness of the data, or
Okay.
or it's a function of sort of like the freshness of the data,
Mhm.
right? So you almost do some of this if you're interested in new content to support some of these AI requirements. Like who's going to own the data? Now we're kind of asking different groups to take a much greater ownership of content. So there's almost like a CMS or a content management system now baked into much of what we do, so that people can understand like who's on point with this data. Like,
Right.
how do we modify that data thoughtfully and in a timely manner?
Right.
Like,
Right.
as this thing, and this is, by the way, mostly for internal consumption, but as things are, age, like your content needs to be revised.
Mhm.
A simple example, if you have like an employee handbook and things change and they do change on a regular basis, like how do you update the parts that change?
Yeah.
Who owns that responsibility in your company?
Right. Right.
And how do they get reminded of the fact that something's changed?
Yeah.
And policy changes and things like that. So anyway, it's a simple example in a way, but it's indicative of sort of the broader problem. So anyways, much of all that's in our world's going to just stuff like
Mhm.
the key challenge for us is to kind of ensure that we have greater understanding of data cleanliness, right? So there's an inherent understanding, I think, between data teams and engineering teams sometimes about the quality of data. That's not always overt, or it's not always in a document, or it's not always like I could look it up and go, oh, that's a high quality, that's a that's an A caliber data source. You know what I mean?
Right.
Versus
Right.
this one's a little suspect. You can use it for macro level understanding, but the details, like we ran a lot of this in our past lives.
Yeah.
Where it's like I would sometimes be in meetings, I would look at data quality, and it'd be like, oh, here are the number of people that attended the game, and I'd be like, oh, I know that's accurate. And then it'd be like, oh, here's a breakdown by different classifications of people attending the game. You're like, okay, that one's okay. And then in your brain, I'm thinking, don't double click anymore. Stop double
Right.
because
Because the next layer down is not going to look. It's not going to be so clean, right?
No, it's not. And every company has that.
Right.
It's
Right.
just
100%.
it's just kind of recognizing, the depth of where you start running into quality challenges, right? And
Right. But it's an exponential problem because you gave one example and just think of that one example as being a vertical, right?
Yeah.
How many dozens and dozens of those verticals exist, right? So we're talking about a lot.
No, I remember being at the Weather Show years ago, and we were doing something like this. And at the time, it wasn't. If you think about it, like what we're doing with generative AI and trying to infuse new skills and a broader, range of individuals.
Mhm.
It's not dissimilar when like report tools came out, report rating tools, right? Because that gave people similar capabilities. It allowed them to be, like whether it's Tableau or Crystal Reports back in the day,
Power BI.
now Power BI and other. I mean, it's like keeps going around and around. But even when those tools first came out, they they enable people to be able to kind of do things on their own that they couldn't do before. And I just remember years ago, we had a presentation, someone was talking about like, some reports they wrote, and they were sharing it. I'm thinking, data is so bad. And I remember talking to them afterwards, and I'm like, hey, if you're if you're doing macro level, I mean, I know the data exists, so you can accumulate the data and,
Right.
and you can talk about it.
Right.
But I go, once you get below this thing, like you should stop, drilling into it because the quality aspects kind of suffer.
Yeah.
And whether it's in forecasting
right,
data,
right.
baseball data, or the things that we deal with now, every company has data challenges. Not every company has sort of individuals that are responsible for kind of cleaning that data. And that's, I think, one of the challenges that many companies will have, which is whose job is that? Because in some respects, it's a joint effort, right? Because departments understand the data, but technology people understand the how.
Because I keep saying, and I feel like nobody likes this when I say that AI is exposing this, right? It's exposing the fact that we don't have data as clean as we need it to be for this, for this new world.
Well, if you think about it, most people didn't even know.
Right.
Most people would have thought, okay, well, hey, we've got an ERP system. We only have people get hired through it, or maybe in contractors in some cases. And that data finds its way into Active Directory in your respective companies, and then that Active Directory then sources a whole bunch of downstream systems and blah 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 blah. Right? Oh my goodness! I think every technology person listening to this conversation knows that the quality as you kind of go down that pipeline can vary really widely.
Yeah.
I mean, Active Directory is not a database. And so even though people have built hooks into a lot of it, it's not a great solution for solving some of these problems.
No, it's just so buried into
then
everything that we do.
But then you add in all these authentication layers and all these other areas, and you take a look at sort of the role of just take employee data, and you think how infused is across your company.
Yeah.
And and the quality issues get introduced. Well, the time.
I think employee data, and not even just employee data, but human resource data, right? Because you got contractors and things like that, right? I think it's the poster child for this problem.
Well, it's a simple problem that everyone can understand.
That's why it's
way worse.
That's why it's the poster child, right?
Yeah,
because everybody can understand this, right? Because we've got human resource data strewn throughout the enterprise, right? Duplicated, right, and non-integrated from system to system to system with all kinds of discrepancies.
Well, and also historically, I think most people listening would agree with this on the tech side. It's like historically there wasn't great bidirectional integration between things like your HR ERP system and things like Active Directory,
right?
Microsoft Active Directory,
right?
I mean, it was almost like a one-way path.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, it would be like, oh, like here's an employee, here's like 12 new fields about Bob. And you're like, perfect. And then but the IT group is responsible maybe for like, oh, they have a new cell phone number. Oh, they have a new email address. Oh, they have other, here's what space they're sitting. Here's these other things. That information may or may not get back to HR, or if it does, it oftentimes isn't through a systematic path.
Right.
And then you start adding more data to that thing, like, oh, what software do they have access to, and all these other things. And then people leave and change departments, and there just keeps
it keeps going.
It always starts to come on.
And we probably could do a whole show on just a resource management system, right? And the dire need.
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
So like we'll just bring it back to the
we're all bad.
Which is data.
That's
and
all it
AI,
does is it exposes like data quality. I guess to your point, and it's an example that everybody can understand. Because how many times, if you're an employee listening to this conversation, how many times is your title not right? Hey, I just got promoted, but my title's not reflected that. Or I noticed it's updated here, but it's not updated here.
Right.
Or what I mean? Or like, that person reports to me, but I don't see it on the org chart. And it's just. It's not a fault of HR groups. I mean, they're certainly, they do their best and things, but there's so much systematic opportunity for things to fall out.
Keeping up with department correlations, right? So I belong to this department versus that department, and department names being spelled differently. One system has 15 departments. Another system has 23 departments, right? It just kind of goes on and on.
All right, if we shouldn't talk about this, I'm going to be like a therapist.
It's going to be like an ERP, starting to become an ERP.
Anyways, I guess the point from listening is that data quality is front and center.
Yep.
And it's now going to be exposed to everybody.
Right.
So it might be one of those things where the IT group would work with HR to partner on how we improve the data.
Yeah.
Now, when people point their, their AI to data like that, they're going to be like, this doesn't look right. And I can just see it. It's going to create this sense of urgency.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're listening to this and you're a technologist, you need to get on it, right? I mean, it's like you need to own it and identify what data is going to be most pivotal and start developing processes around it. How are you going to keep it clean? So I think it's a good thing. I think it's a wake up call to all of us to have, the methodology, the processes in place to kind of do these things.
Right.
And I think what also happens, I'm just thinking your example with HR's data, what happens oftentimes, it's not just HR data, we have the same thing in some of our systems data, is that we all want to make the input process easy.
Mm-hmm.
And so oftentimes, we want people, whether it's external systems or internal systems, we really want 25 pieces of data. But we'll say things like, okay, we're just getting to the first 10 or 12 pieces of data, and we'll come back with the other stuff later.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how it is. That later now seldom happens, or it doesn't happen in timely manner.
Right.
Anyways, so building a semantic layer is so important,
right?
Because there has to be the ability for to develop in such a method that your generative AI solutions, if that's what you're using, can effectively integrate with it, and make accurate decisions.
Yeah,
that's the key thing. Is you can expose AI to data, but the quality of its ability, its likelihood of hallucination is going to increase if it's looking at non-structured data, and if it's looking at non-structured data that's not operated through a well thought out.
Right.
And that doesn't even get into privacy and other
this
things.
semantic layer initiative is relatively new right now for us.
For us,
yes. Yeah. And so, I'd love to revisit that as we go along here this year and start working on that. I'd love to, we could probably do a whole show on just,
the thing that's interesting about it, it's going to create new expectations and skills kind of in spaces that, some of this existed. It's just that now it existed in small pockets.
Yeah.
And now it's going to have to exist at a corporate level, and that's going to be a whole new, can of worms.
Well, let me bring us back to guidelines.
Yeah,
guardrails, not governance. Guardrails, right? Guardrails is the new. Guardrails is the new governance, right?
Yeah, right.
I'd love to finish up this show today with kind of what we're doing to create the guardrails. We have the shark. We have a concept called the shark tank.
We started talking about skinny down BRDs. All these things. So
exactly.
What we did in our world is, as people come up with new ideas, POCs, and things like that, at the departmental level, we ask our AI champions to be tier 1.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll take a look at them. They'll give them guidance in terms of, hey, you're lacking information here. I noticed you didn't really, I'm a little bit confused what you're trying to get done here. And if these are small, when I say small, we tend to think small is something that's done in days, single digit days. That can be done in single digit days. Or take some of the simple use cases we were talking about earlier. If somebody wants to do something in their department that makes them more efficient and productive, we're using our champions as sort of the first line to kind of ensure that they're doing it and learning and with best practice,
right,
things like that. And so to me, I think that's a great. I mean, our champions like it. They develop a relationship more with their peers, if you will. It raises the bar. I think it's all good. As things move in a t-shirt size from small to medium and large, we have an AI shark tank that evaluates this, right? So we get together, we assess, AI requests, and we evaluate them. That's a group that's comprised of people from both technology groups and business teams and finance organizations, finance ones that have the ultimate responsibility for ROIs and other sort of things. Because guess what? Big shocker here, but most IT people don't do a very good job of calculating return on investment. It's funny. I
Or-
mean,
or-
my whole
or how-
I said, like, what's your return on investment? They'd be like, this is it. And you're like, does that include like ongoing support? No, it doesn't. Support does include this. No, it doesn't include that. And so, anyways, we're aware of all those things. So our general effort though with the Shark Tank concept though is even if someone comes in with something that is borderline, we're because we're sort of early in this process in some respects too, we're very forgiving. Like it's not meant to be a draconian, like, oh my God,
Right. Slam the
doing
door shut.
today, 4 o'clock a meeting with the Shark Tank. Like, it's gonna, I don't, it shouldn't be anything that someone dreads,
Yeah, exactly.
But what it
And the
does,
team, and I'll interject this too. When we put this together, the broader team, right? So it's made up of, like you said a moment ago, representatives of all the different business units. They wanted to really cast a wide net on this, right? They wanted to make sure that everybody was welcome to come in with ideas, right? And let's take a look at everything, because you never know what we might be missing. You never know who has the great nugget that comes in.
well, and
So it's very welcoming.
I believe I agree with that, and it's hopefully non-threatening.
Correct. Yeah.
And so people bring their ideas, they get feedback.
Yep.
And the feedback can range from, hey, I think you need to go back here and do a bit more homework. I think you kind of missed this, or this is not clear.
Right.
And so some of it can be a go back and, we'll schedule another time type of thing. Or it could just be that, hey, that's an interesting idea. It doesn't seem it's going to move the needle or it's going to have much of an impact. Let's not invest in that. Or, by the way, the investment's too much. Right, like
the return's not there.
Right, or by the way, just because it keeps going, or we pause it sometimes because we don't have the data yet.
Mm-hmm. Back to data.
You know what I mean? That we don't have the data in a in either a quality or an environment where we feel good enough where we can sort of enact on it. We now change that into a scheme or POC where people can at least make some progress while something else is going on. But you can sort of see where a lot of these are going to go. It's like there's lots of reasons why things may or may not move forward, not just 100%. Financial, kind of thing. And so
and
that's our process.
Yeah. And there's two parts to it, right? So there's the wide net that comes in. So we make it really easy for everybody to kind of come in, go through the process, get the initial feedback. One of the other things we do is, especially for something that's being considered to move forward, is size it. Right? How big is this effort? Right? So totally. I think we went from small, medium, and large to small, medium, large, and extra large. Did you hear about the extra large? Yeah, that just got underneath.
Well, and also once it gets the green light from that group, it goes. We partner with our PMO organization, and it becomes another project, no different than any other technology project.
Yeah.
Now it doesn't mean the technology group is the only one working on it, but it becomes another priority that has to get kind of like cued into the relative staff.
Well, and you have a new direct report, Chris, architecture and IT, right? And so they're providing what I call the technical representative. So the business comes, they get the green light, they move forward, they get assigned an IT AI rep, right? Who's going to help them with guidelines, help them with data, help them with, who's going to get this done. Because in some cases, the citizen developer might be able to do some of the development.
Yeah.
In some cases, in many cases, they're going to need some help.
But almost every case, they're going to need help. It's just it's a question almost of where the help comes from, and so, and this is where we're still cutting our teeth.
Yeah.
Because it's
it's that thing you're talking about earlier.
We don't need help. We want to ensure that all the expectations and requirements and character, up front is done before we kind of like we would expect any technology project. So someone's done their due diligence.
Yep, 100%.
And then once that's checkbox being checked, we tend to take a look at the data quality. We tend to take a look at sort of what it would take to develop it, what tools might be required, what the team might look like. All the usual sort of suspects. And that team element is a little bit different because there's probably going to be more participation now from non-technology IT people, which is great.
Yeah.
Which I think is terrific. And so I'm excited about the whole thing. I feel like it has great opportunity. I think the challenge for any CIO out there is I think in one of our past podcasts we were saying CIO, and it's really, I mean, the key thing there is like, I was reading an article we talked about once before about chief intelligence orchestrator.
Orchestrator, right?
And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, that's really well said.
Wait.
I-
So
I-
the orchestrator. So it's still CIO.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we don't have to rebrand the CIO
No, there you
project.
go. No, it's more than career is over, which is good.
Right.
It's
So it's gone from careers over to chief information officer to now chief information orchestrator.
or intelligence orchestrator,
Intelligence orchestrator.
whatever the right word is.
Yeah. That's
But
better.
the point though is that you are choreographing all of this if you're doing it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You're choreographing traditional IT power to choreographing the non-traditional elements,
Right.
and the goal is to kind of like weave them into something that brings us accelerates organizations' capabilities that unlike never before.
Yeah.
So I think, I have never been more enthusiastic about opportunities and things. It's a hard thing, going back to something that's at the very beginning, is not every company, no, well, maybe no company is fully ready, but many companies are burdened by like the guardrails being too tight. When I think of guardrails, and as companies think about these guardrails, these governance elements, you can start something and put the guardrails, where you think they belong. Or what happens in too many companies is those guardrails, they should be set at, think of it as a highway. These things should have been set at like 40 feet apart. They're set at like 6 feet apart. And so you're constantly bumping into issues. You constantly
Are we in this metaphor? Are we picking on legal and security, or is it more than that?
It's sometimes it's cultural. I think
Mhm.
sometimes it's legal. I think, let's face it, like legal's job is to, protect the company and its reputation, its content and things. And most legal people I've worked with tend not to be technologists. Like I know very, 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 very few, like two,
To those of our legal colleagues, we love you.
But they tend to.
And-
it almost is like, so they tend not to be, very forward leaning. A lot of the younger ones, by the way, tend to be more now. But so the challenge is
Good
going to
point.
be like there's risk, and so how do they protect the risk,
Right.
but how do you be productive? And I feel like, at least in our company, I feel like we can strike a good balance.
Yeah.
Other companies I'm familiar with, that's way more
That's
way more challenging.
Yeah.
And it's gonna, unfortunately, it's gonna impact their overall effectiveness in the near term, at least, until they kind of are able to kind of iron these things out.
Right.
One thing I would encourage you to do that I did, is, and I'm happy to help others, by the way, on this topic too, is I did surveys of other CIOs. Like we were going down this path about like what the boundaries ought to be within our legal counsel, in my past life. And they were like, "Oh, I want to know every prompt that people put in." I'm like, "No, you don't." Like I'm like, "No, you don't." And I want to know this. I want to know this. I want to know this. And I took every one of those questions. There's probably like 8 of them. I put them in a survey, and I said, "Hey, we're considering boundaries and governance aspects in our company." I'm like, and I sent like 100 CIOs, and I heard back from like 60 of them. And I went and I categorized all the responses and stuff. And I'm like, all right, well, 98% of them don't do that. And it's like, oh.
And how long ago was this?
Year and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
And and I would literally go through each one of them, and I was sitting down with legal, and we changed the policies around that. Now, not everyone listening, has that network that they could just do that with.
Right.
But
if you're a CIO and you are interested in the network,
yeah. No,
reach out.
Yeah, I'm happy to, because it's these are things that, like, if you're stuck, that's great unstuck, for people, right? Like, what are my peers doing? And if you find that you're dying 1,000 deaths because it's too restrictive and the guardrails are pressing on both sides of your head, kinds of things, then you're going to have to reach out and find ways of trying to reestablish what maybe a more proper balance ought to be.
Right. And it might lead us kind of to the last point that you had given me to talk about, which is leadership really needs to come from the top, right? So it can't just be coming from the IT organization.
Yeah, this is. We said culture, but this is maybe part of the culture bucket. Is we're blessed with a leadership team that's forward leaning.
Oh yeah, I would say
all
a
in.
safeguard. Yeah,
They're like all in, which is terrific.
Mhm.
Although relatively recent phenomena. I mean, candidly, I mean, not that some of the individuals weren't, but it's in terms of everybody all in.
Seems natural to me though, just given how recent everything is.
100%.
Right.
Yeah, it's not unexpected.
Right.
I'm sure it's unexpected. It's not it's not a reflection that we weren't more
Mhm.
forward leaning. And by the way, had we been more forward
Probably
leaning,
would have been too early.
no, it would have been too early. That's the challenge too. Is
Yeah.
It's like striking the right balance of when you're ready and
Mhm.
when the technology is
Yeah.
ready, and things like that. And then
When
technology
you jump into the wave,
into the
right?
deep
Yeah.
end,
Yeah, into the
right? So,
tsunami.
yeah. So I mean, I'm super, super, super excited about it, type of thing. But but because the challenge is if you're an IT or CIO or IT leader
Mhm.
and you don't have that buy-in at the most senior levels, it's it's like pushing a rope, and so you might get sort of the green light to be able to create some POCs, so that you can at least start to become educated and you can share the POCs. But that's a really gradual process. That's a very, oh, let me show you what I did. And oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
maybe you can tackle a bigger project next.
And,
Okay,
and
sounds
6
good.
months goes by like that.
Oh, like nothing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and if you don't have like the most senior leadership, your CEO and others
Yeah.
on board, it's like, how do you do the education piece? Like, how do you make the investments?
Yeah, it takes
It's a real chicken and egg thing,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like, we've made some significant investments, but you look at a lot of companies and it's like, well, how do we know it's going to work? Well, we have to make some investments. Oh, I don't want to make the investments until you know it's going to work. And
Right.
so, you show them some limited POC. It's really hard to extrapolate
Right.
that now we ought to be investing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into these different things.
Right.
And so it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard if you don't have that support. I would again go back to what your peers are doing or what they do in your industry. Everybody wants to be generally seen as being progressive in their industry.
Sure.
So, I mean, to me, it's like find ways of knowing where the bar is and where you enter a relationship, type of thing.
Right. Right.
Also focus on the ROI. I think too often people start with POCs that are cute,
Yeah.
and it's, that's all well and good if you try to drive like, if I don't know what that word is, like tactical improvement, and productivity improvement and stuff.
Right.
But at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's really important that we kind of, you do the math, figure out the ROIs, create friendships with your finance team,
Right.
find the right ones that move the needle, and then grow from there.
It just really highlights the importance of going to your leadership team, including your CEO, right?
Yeah.
That includes your CEO, and really approaching it as a partnership. Hey, we all know this is coming. We all know this is here. Let's partner up.
Yeah, and
make this
one thing you and I were talking about, just maybe end on this.
Okay.
As technologists, as you're listening to this, we try to be disciplined. We've had many years now with technology.
We try.
Yeah, where we've developed a method to our madness, right? It's a I would characterize it as it's like ready, aim, fire. In the new world that we're living in, it's okay to be a little, ready, fire, aim. And I'm not saying that's ideal. It's not. But the reality is we're experimenting a lot more than we were before. And
Still better than fire ready aim, right?
yeah, there you go. But it's like it goes back a little bit to the old days of R&D,
Okay.
right? Where it's just we want to make sure it's controlled. However,
Mhm.
you know what I mean. So it's not just R and no D. Where
Yeah.
people like, just toil away without ever kind of implementing anything. So,
Right.
anyways, I guess the key thing is like you need to give yourself a little grace here that
Yeah.
it's not going to follow a linear progression where everything just seems very organized and very structured. You're going to have to, I think, controlled chaos on some areas is kind of going to turn out to be the new norm.
I think honestly, if I were to entitle this show, "Controlling the Chaos" might be one of the
yeah, no doubt.
be one of the leading candidates for the title,
Right. Because
Controlling the
there's so
Chaos.
many things that can kind of go, awry.
Yeah.
When we talked about data, we talked about governance, we talked about leadership. Oh, we didn't even get into it,
Education.
but education, we even talked about this, but like people, like who you hire, how we train this. We talked a little about training, but how it changes our hiring practices and things like that.
Yeah.
There's a great example. You cannot do that. You cannot have those conversations without leadership from the very top. How do you impact the fact that you're encouraging the company to pivot a bit and to hire people that might be more what we might characterize as good athletes or, change oriented or have maybe some very, have some historical AI experience, generative AI experience, even if it's limited.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I love the word historical there. Historically recent.
Yeah. But versus sort of like maybe what you would have hired normally.
Oh, 100%.
And so that's an engagement. I think CEOs also need to kind of develop a much closer relationships with the heads of HR, and chief human resource operator, chief information. What am I looking for here? Sorry,
this is the HR
suite leaders, whatever, and CHROs. I guess is the word I was looking for. Because it's like, especially as you get into like agentic AI, we're now going to have digital workers. We already have digital workers,
right?
But in some cases, digital workers can perform many or most of the most of the roles that are provided. Not most, I got to be most across the company, but in certain areas, it can provide things that were being done by humans, and so that touches HR.
Interesting. It's a really interesting concept.
So now you need to build a relationship with your HR folks, a tighter one. So you start to think about like, oh, is the answer to this problem a digital worker or a human? And, and those will become, interesting conversations in the future because we've never had to think about things like that way.
Digital workers in HR. I'm writing it down right now. Yeah. So there you have it, folks. Great. I love doing these mornings.
Initial conversations. So I hope everyone, and by the way, and we said at the very beginning, we are not in this category. We may have, many, many years of experience. We're all learning.
Yeah, we're all learning.
I sometimes listen to people talk about like, how they're like an authority in these topics. I think to myself, like, good grief. Like, like I don't consider it, if I did something for 3 or 4 years, I'm not an expert. Doing something 20 and 25 and 30.
It's a different story.
It's like, so we're all in uncharted territory. Right. So hopefully some of these best practices and rules of engagement and guardrails are beneficial to you when you let us know. We're happy to, I'm certain we'll be talking more about this. And
you think we'll talk about AI again?
I think there's a good chance. Yeah, probably a good chance before like we end the next 10 minutes, I suspect.
So you're telling me there's a chance? All right, there you go. There you have it, guys. Citizen developers, quelling anxiety, top down versus bottom up. The pride of enabling the employees, right? And there's a lot of pride going on here. So digital workers in HR, which is really kind of a mind-blowing concept. That's
what it's just.
And you got it all
here.
In partnership with HR. Yeah. So there you have it. You get it all here on the CIO project. And until next time, you guys have a great week.
Take care, everyone.